Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 309 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, joined by my co-host. He is Adnan Ikic. Adnan, tough game on Sunday. Super ugly game. I believe I referred to it as a stinky dog doo-doo game. That's the gentle interpretation of what I said actually on the post-game show. But yeah, tough game, big loss, but happy to have you here, Adnan, to talk about how the Falcons or what the Falcons can do to fix the issues, what is fixable, what isn't, so on and so forth. But before we get into any of that, Adnan, how are we doing tonight?
In a testament to the Falcons, I almost didn't show up this week.
just almost was like, yeah, no, I can't do it. This this is too much. This is a bridge too far.
Next week is a Thanksgiving week. A lot of people are off work, and just like how the Falcons are on a bye week. I almost decided that this week I'm not working either. Same way that the Falcons decided that they were taking a week off a week early.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not a bad idea. If I wasn't already taking next week off, I probably would have been like, yeah, no, I'm phoning this weekend 100%. But with next week already on the books for me, I had to deliver shows this week on time. So, and helping us do that, by the way, is special guest Aaron Freeman at Locked On Falcons on the Twitters. Aaron, welcome back to the show. We were talking before the show, last couple times you were on after victories. I know that's very much against your preference. You love to come on. As you know, you are the most famous Falcons hater. Apparently, I've become a famous Falcons hater now too, but I could never dream to take your crown in that regard. So now that, the Falcons have lost, the worst loss of the season, we obviously had to get you on to unleash the fury. But how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing all right. I probably won't be as negative as people assume I will be coming off of this loss. But yeah, it is, as the original Falcons hater, Kevin, I don't mind passing the torch on to you and passing the crown on to you if you feel like you're worthy to take it on. I've been holding on to this crown for a very long time, and I'm just been looking for a worthy heir to take it and pass it forward. So if you're ready for it, then I will happily pass this to you.
Yeah, heavy is the head that wears the crown, so that it's a lot to carry that burden for so many years with this team. So yeah, I don't blame you for looking for it out there. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how that progresses over the course of this season. If they miss the playoffs again, I might jump on that offer and become the king.
Yeah, I think you'll be ready. I think you'll.
Yeah, at that point, I'll have fully taken my Joker turn here, where I just want to watch the world burn. But guys, we got a lot to get to tonight. We're going to be talking about, can the Falcons fix all these issues that we've talked about for many weeks? A lot of people glossed over because the Falcons were winning. Last 2 weeks, we've seen some of these issues rear their ugly head. Obviously, the defense is the most obvious, but the offense's inefficiencies cost them big against the Broncos and the Saints as well. So we'll get into that stuff. What can the Falcons fix? What can't they fix? There are certainly some limitations here, but a bye week coming up, obviously, that we can see. What can the Falcons do? Because they can do some things. Can they do enough? That's another question, obviously. But we will definitely address that tonight. But before we dive in too far, folks, want to bring you word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting options, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to place bets on the games as they are happening. If you really get into that stuff, I just like to watch the games live. I don't try to figure out the optimum time to place the bets. But if you're one of those folks that likes to do that, likes to get in there and be like, oh, I can see the money line's moving, but I still feel really good about this team at halftime. You can do that, but that's not my preference. But it could be yours, and if it is, BetOnline's got the largest selection of odds on everything from football, college football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, MMA. If you could think of it, they probably got it somewhere on there. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website, betonline.ag today, to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. And when you sign up, make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. Well, let's start off tonight's discussion with just your take. I mean, Aaron, I'll let you get the first crack at it. Obviously, the score kind of speaks for itself in terms of the on-field result, but I think those of us that were paying attention, watching the injury report, were kind of. I was foreseeing a very difficult situation on Sunday. I didn't think it was going to be that bad, but that was a tough one. So what? Now that we've had several days to kind of digest it, I know you've been releasing many episodes on the topic. What's your sort of overall takeaway from what was the worst performance of the season for this Falcons team?
Yeah, I knew going into this game the Broncos. I haven't done a deep dive on the Chargers or Vikings yet, but at least of the teams I've studied so far, that this was going to be a team that was going to be a really tough matchup for this Falcon team. Defensively, they do all the things that you need to do well in order to stop this offense. They can stop the run. They can rush the quarterback. They're top 5, top 10 in both of those areas. And they have a cornerback that can erase one of your wide receivers. And if the Broncos had chosen to make that Darnell Mooney, as good as Drake London has been, I don't know if this Falcons offense can thrive if they're not able to run the football, being that sort of methodical team when you take away the big play from Darnell Mooney. Now, in this game, Patrick Surtain didn't really shadow either of the receivers. He just sort of stayed on his side of the field, and whoever, and took away that receiver. And so you didn't really see the Falcons do a great job taking advantage of the favorable matchups on the other side. They did try to go after the Broncos nickel cornerback Jaquan McMillan early in the game. They had some success, but eventually I think the Broncos adjusted. The pass rush for the Broncos was very effective at slowing down this Falcons offense. And, really nobody on the offensive line really had a good game on Sunday. Obviously the run game was pretty much a non-factor after that first drive. And so you saw, basically the Falcons put together one good drive on offense, and that was the opening drive, and they blew it with penalties at the end of that, and had to settle for 3 instead of scoring a touchdown, and then really did nothing else the rest of the game. And then defensively, it was going to be a tough matchup given some of the injuries, but my hope was, hey, this defense can do what they've done for the most part this year, which is just be good enough, just not be terrible. Just, they're going to give up some points. Denver's going to be able to drive the ball pretty easily on the ground, but maybe they'll get the stops in the red zone that will force Denver to settle for 3. And if the Falcons offense is getting 7, that's a formula for success that the Falcons can win the game. Unfortunately, with the Falcons' lack of pass rush in this game and the injuries in the secondary, you saw a lot of blown coverages on the back end. And it seemed like Denver really did a great job using motion, using misdirection with the play action, all these other things to really confuse. And specifically, a lot of those plays, like the Nate Adkins touchdown, like some of the big plays, were going after players like Clark Phillips, going after players like Richie Grant, going after players like Lorenzo Carter, guys that haven't been starters, that have been backups, or in Lorenzo Carter's case, been on IR for 4 weeks. And it just seemed like there was a lot of miscommunication on the part of the Falcons with some of these new pieces. And when you had a defense that was barely playing at an acceptable level with the starters, sort of taking a couple of pieces away from them, I think sort of the bottom fell out for this football team. And so you got that sort of killer combination of the offense runs into a buzzsaw and doesn't really have a great plan to sort of specifically try to go after the Broncos, and whatever they tried to do wasn't that effective because really nobody came to play on offense on Sunday. And then you have the defense with the bottom falling out, and they can't really get the stops that they need to early in the game to keep the offense in it. And so, basically by the time we got to halftime when it's 21-6, and then we come out in the third quarter and the Falcons have a 3 and out, and then Denver goes down the field and scores, game's pretty much over at that point in time. And so, we got 2 good throws from Michael Penix. So, that's a great thing to take away from the game. I mean, Brandon Doyle's had a couple of good reps, Jason McCullough had a couple of nice runs. But, other than a couple of Jesse Bates plays and a couple of nice catches from Drake London and 1 or 2 good runs from Bijan, not a whole lot. Zach Harrison playing really well. Not a whole lot to write home about in the positive for the Falcons. So it was, as Adnan said, it didn't seem like the team showed up really at all. And they were ready for their bye week just a week too early, basically.
Yeah, that was sort of the look. It's just, man, they were ready to get out of there pretty quick. They were like, oh no. Well, I guess this one we're gonna chalk this one up. But yeah, that was an ugly ass game, no doubt about it. But yeah, Adnan, you feel the same way about this one? I mean, that was a brutal watch on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I brought it up on the show last week. I was really, really worried just about the logistics of this game. Actually brought it up during our, pick by pick show during the preseason that this had all the makings of a trap game if Denver was bad, but Denver's actually a pretty good football team this year. So it was just an ass kicking, more or less. But yeah, a game in between New Orleans and the bye week, a late bye week, going out west, going to altitude, all of that was just sort of a recipe for disaster. The team didn't get out there until I think the night before as well. And yeah, they just looked like they were sort of, uninterested, more or less. And yeah, they just absolutely got their asses kicked. Bo Nix looked like an MVP in this game, and it didn't even feel like he needed to exert himself too much. I think his average depth of target or depth of pass was 6 yards.
I think it was less. I think it was like 4 something.
Yeah, and that resulted in 307 passing yards because of all the yak they got. There were multiple times when you saw the Falcons just, it was like a 3rd and long, and you had all the DBs lining up beyond the sticks. And I think I tracked it on the first 3 drives. Denver converted either 3rd and 9 or more, or second. I think it was a 3rd and 9, a 2nd and 16, a 2nd and 17, and a 3rd and 13, all within the first 3 drives. And it was all right. After you saw that, it's all right, it's just gonna be this type of game. The offense, like Aaron said, just shot itself in the foot after that first drive, and it just feels like this game got so out of hand early because the margin for error was just so thin, from the start that, by the time we got to halftime, it's what the hell just happened? That was a really fast moving half. And yeah, they went out there in the second half. We remember that 4th down, which, as much as you can say about the Falcons, that defense did enough to get off the field on that 4th down. I have no idea how the referees overturned that 4th down conversion where they called it an incompletion. But I digress. The Falcons didn't lose because of that. I was just shocked. I just feel like that was sort of the kill shot, where after that the Broncos scored a touchdown, and it's you just sort of throw your hands up and you're like, okay, literally nothing's going right today.
Yeah, it was ugly. It fell apart quick too, and it's it started the way as soon as the offense went down, they marched down the field. It was a good they were looking good. I was like, okay, well maybe this will be a shootout. Maybe this team will have a chance, and we'll just have to find a way to score. And then it's just a repeat of last week. It's all right, we're in the red. Oh no, there we go. Yeah, there's the implosion. There's what I was expecting. And then it's well, now by the time you get to halftime, you're down 21-6. It's well, we can't really lean on the run game like we wanted to either, down this many points. And then, Kirk started pressing, throws a terrible interception. And it's well, that's all she wrote. Just an ugly game from top to bottom. I agree with your assessment. I think these guys were tired, and, I don't really get the whole, let's show up a day before the game. It takes I'm someone who skis, right? So especially when I lived in Florida and then went to go to Montana or Utah or something like that, where I was going to thousands of feet, you want to get there at least a day to 2 days ahead of time to even have a chance of being able to catch your breath that first day you're skiing. I can't even imagine for an NFL game where you're going extremely hard, downhill skiing. It is exercise, and there's definitely you can do it to where it's pretty, intensive in terms of effort, but it's not NFL football intensive. So it kind of blows my mind that they would think that they would be adjusted and acclimated to that altitude in a day, or
Not
less.
even a day.
Yeah,
it was
that's
they posted the night before of the players getting on the plane, and I was Yeah, I mean, I should have known right there that they
Yeah.
probably lost at that point. It's like, okay, like you, what do you mean this picture isn't from like Tuesday? What do you mean you're going to Denver right now? But
Right.
that,
Yeah.
that's another in like a series of questionable like decisions from the coaching staff this week. And it's yeah, I'm with you. I went up to Denver to ski I think it was like a year ago, and like you have trouble breathing just like
Yeah.
sitting in the like just sitting down. Like it does take some acclimating, some getting used to, but yeah, it's at the very least they don't have to play in Denver anymore.
That's true. No more Denver games this year. I can guarantee that. So at least there's that. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a perfect storm, like you said. You come off an emotional game against New Orleans, which I really hope that we don't look back at that game being the difference between this team making the playoffs or not, because they blew that opportunity. That was one of the easier games left on their schedule. I know it's the Saints and it's always going to be a tough game, but you had to have that one. You don't get it. So then the Broncos game became a lot more important. Obviously you blow that, and then now you got to come out of the bye and face the Chargers and the Vikings back to back. And you probably need to come away with a win from one of those games. I don't, whichever one, it doesn't really matter. Obviously the Vikings one would be better for playoff seeding purposes, but really just any win, because, obviously the Bucs have that cupcake schedule, and they still have to be almost perfect. Like, so there's always the chance that they're just, not able to do that, which is pretty likely, but that with them playing that easy schedule, it's not a safe lead anymore. And I think that's reflected in the playoff statistics. The Falcons are down to about 70%, which feels about right to me, honestly. I feel like they were always around 70%. Like, even when they had that big lead earlier, I was like, I don't trust this like 90% number. Like, that's just way too much at this point in the season. But yeah, they're gonna have to find a way to get some wins against some good opponents to be able to comfortably make the playoffs at this point. And that kind of goes into the topic of tonight's show, which is, what is fixable from what we saw against the Broncos. Alex Foster's idea with the $5 is, can we clone Dyson Daniels and have him play defense for the Falcons? Is that allowed, Adnan?
I mean, I don't see anything that would be against it in the NFL rule book. So yeah, I think that may be their best bet, because
it may be a crime against nature. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Cloning laws or
God, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Dyson Daniels is single-handedly fixing the Hawks defensive culture. So, maybe get him in on the Falcons. He can't rush the pass rusher any worse than what we've seen so far this year. This team has 10 sacks in 11 games.
Yeah, just throw him out there and see what happens, But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know how long the cloning process will take. I'm not sure that help would arrive before the end of the season. So that might be more of a long-term fix. But
yeah, maybe he like comes back cloned as like a baby, and then
right.
It would take about 21 years, which
get started on that,
really
though. We can get that going now, for the future. But yeah, I don't know how long that's going to take. But yeah, I mean, Aaron, like, obviously the first thing to talk about, and you mentioned it in your assessment, the injuries certainly played a part in this looking just absolutely disastrous, right? I mean, you're down 3 DBs. You lose another one on the first drive of the game. Obviously, that's going to affect things. So how big of an impact do you think the injuries had? And do you think there's a reasonable expectation that getting some of these guys back after the bye week could fix some of these issues that we saw in the Denver game?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it seems like, a lot of more people have worn out their welcome on Nate Landman playing at this point in time. And it feels like the shift, it was a year, this time last year, everybody was like, Nate Landman's the greatest thing ever. No one cares about Troy Anderson. And now it's like, please, Troy, come back. We need you.
Buddy. Yeah. How you doing? Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously the issue with Troy Anderson is he can't stay healthy. He hasn't been healthy for the last 2 years. So hopefully he'll come back during a bye week or after the bye week and actually play these last 6 games. Because boy, do the Falcons need a little bit more juice on their defense, a little bit more speed in the middle of the field? So I do think that will help. I also think, getting Mike Hughes and D. Alford back, I wasn't in love with how those guys have been playing over the last couple of weeks. And so going into this game, I was like, oh yeah, they're not going to miss those guys that much, like it's not like they're the best corners in the league. And it's like, then you watch Clark Phillips and Kevin King and Richie Grant and all those guys. And Natron Brooks had a couple of nice plays in the game, but like you watch the rest of those guys and like, oh man, Mike Hughes, D. Alford, I will happily take what you guys were giving us these last, 4 or 5 weeks of, even if you consider that subpar play, that's better than what we were getting on Sunday. So I think that will definitely benefit. And then we'll see what happens up front with Rukaroro. Raheem hinted that he may come back. He also hinted that there's a chance that DeMarco Hellens could come back. That would also, I think, boost the Falcons and give them an actual dime back so that they don't have to play Kevin King in that role.
Or Richie Grant.
So I think so. I really do feel like injuries and if this team is healthy, JD Bertrand as well, coming back from his concussion, all of those factors would definitely benefit this team. Again, is it going to make the Falcons into a good defense? No. But can it make the Falcons into a good enough defense so that they can win the games that they need to win? I think so. So yeah, I do feel like the injuries are a big part of just being healthy down the stretch, or healthier down the stretch, will go a long way to helping this team play some good football and hopefully make this playoff run. But Kevin, I know you sit here and talk about the Falcons and their playoff chances. Like, you've been watching this team all season long. They were going to make this as dramatic as possible.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like every game, even when they win the games, it's always dramatic in the last 5 minutes. So you knew going into the last 6 weeks of the season, it was going to be as dramatic. It's going to be a week 18.
They're going to have to win the Panthers game. Yeah.
Fourth quarter, Bryce Young, a 7-7 ball game, and we need to win this game in order to make that's. I don't know why anybody thought the Falcons would give you something different than that this season. So if you thought that the Falcons would just, cakewalk, moonwalk to the playoffs this year, that's on you, my guy. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
And
no.
There are people saying it, maybe we'll see Michael Penix in week 18, well, maybe we'll pull the starters,
maybe we'll see Michael Penix in week 12 or 13,
Yeah, no, but what Aaron's trying to say about, in layman's terms, regarding the cornerbacks looking better compared to Clark Phillips and those guys, a girl who's a 6 can easily look like she's an 8 when you put her next to a 3. And
doing math now, yeah.
Hey, quick maths out here, quick maths, because it's looking rough with Richie Grant out there and Clark Phillips and those boys. Because man, you gain a new appreciation for D. Alford and for Mike Hughes, and it's like, maybe I won't be so critical about them.
UCF legend Mike Hughes, put some respect on, apparently. Yeah. No, well, with one UCF legend, there can only be one UCF legend rising at a time. So as soon as Mike Hughes hit, I knew that Richie Grant's season was completely doomed, because there's just not possible on this team to have multiple UCF players. It was Kamal Ishmael and no one else, and then now it's Mike Hughes. That's just how this has to go. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it seemed like the injuries came to a head this week. I mean, that was clear. The Falcons haven't been injury-free by any stretch, but it was like they would come in spurts where they would be down a guy or two, but they didn't get ravaged at a single position. So it didn't really cause the defense to fall apart fundamentally. Obviously this week that changed when you had 3 different pieces in the secondary. So obviously if just, if 2 of those guys come back, if we get D. Alford and Mike Hughes back, then that's going to fix a lot of those issues. It was surprising to me to see Clark Phillips the culprit for so many of those blown coverages, given that of all the depth players, he's the one that's actually been playing, not a ton of snaps, but some, every week. So I was shocked that it was him that was giving up a lot of those busted coverages. But there's a lot of moving parts. It's not like he's the only guy coming in. But shout out to Trone Brooks. Like you guys said, I think he was definitely the most interesting of all the guys we trotted out there against the Broncos. He definitely looked like he wanted to be out there. He was excited to get his NFL snaps on defense, unlike a lot of the other people, it seemed like. But The injuries, like, I think the takeaway is, like, injury-wise, this is something that should be fixable. Is it gonna fix the Falcons' defense? Like, no. Like, but the defense could go back to looking like they were, earlier in the year, where they were like a functional defense, just not a very good one. So that would be a big improvement ultimately. That would be a big improvement over what we saw against the Broncos, which was catastrophically bad. I mean, there's no way around it. Like, the coverage busts for one thing, but the tackling was bad. The way they played those screens was like the ugliest I've ever seen screens defended in my life. It was just like, okay, no one really wants a piece of this. Really watching Matt Judon get blown off the line of scrimmage by a fullback. That was when I really realized that they were kind of phoning this one in. It's like, oh, okay, I guess we just don't care. Like, you got to have enough self-respect to not get blown off the line of scrimmage by a fullback, Judon. But yeah, that was a rough watch. But on the other side of the ball, the injuries too. One thing, Drew Dahlman has practiced fully now for 2 weeks. Was inactive last week, but this weekend he was activated off IR, and he was active for the game and didn't play. So that was confusing to me, given that Raheem Morris said, yeah, if he's ready, he's the starter. And given that they activated him off IR, it would seem to suggest that he was ready, because he still had another week to stay on IR if he was not ready. But what did you think of that, Adnan, that they just seem to continue rolling with Ryan Newsel?
I mean, it's weird. On one hand, if you really wanted to utilize the bye week and you really wanted to, sort of rest him through these past 2 weeks into the bye week and just ensure that he's 100% healthy, then you could have just, kept him on IR and, kept the open roster spot. But yeah, it is really weird because he was practicing fully leading up to the Saints game too, and we thought we were going to see him last week against the Saints. And now it's 2 weeks later. Like, he obviously did not re-aggravate any injury because he keeps practicing fully. I don't think he's been benched because I'm sure Raheem Morris would not have said he's a starter. So I don't know. It's genuinely a weird situation. I don't have an answer because it just seems inexplicable that he didn't play, and that they, at the very least didn't keep him on IR if this was the plan. Like, if this was the plan all along, I would have understood it, but why activate him off IR? But yeah, hopefully we see him, 100% out of the bye week. Well, we probably should at this point, right?
Yeah, you would think so. Aaron, what did you think about the decision for them to just not play Dahlman? Do you think it was he's not really ready, or something else going on there?
Yeah, I'm similar to Adnan. I'm a little baffled by it because I think today would have been the final day on that 21-day window. And so if you weren't planning on playing him last week, then why, as you said, like, why activate him if the plan was, and especially late in the game when Penix came in, they put in several backups, but they didn't take Ryan Newsel out of the game. They didn't take Caleb McGarry out of the game. They didn't take Matthew Bergeron out of the game, although they easily could have, because they had the rare instance where they had 10 active offensive linemen last week, because basically they had to have that many offensive linemen because they couldn't figure out how to get how many active players for the rest of the position, because they only had 4 corners or whatever, usually than the 6 or 7 that they usually have active on game days. And so it was weird to sort of see them sub out only 2 of the starters at the end of the game when you could have easily put in Dahlman and gotten him some reps for those 2 series, and same thing with Elijah Wilkinson. It was a weird choice that the Falcons made there. So it didn't make any sense to me that why you would have him active if the plan wasn't to play him. You could have used that roster spot for somebody that could have shored up one of the other areas that you were kind of thin at on Sunday instead. So that didn't make a ton of sense to me. But maybe I think the Falcons. I know I'm trying to give them
Yeah.
the benefit of the doubt, and maybe that late flight to Denver, and he didn't adjust well to the altitude or something. I don't know, and they were like, "We'll sit you, I guess, this week, and we'll get you back for the charge." I don't know, but yeah, it didn't make a ton of sense to me.
No, that was one of the more baffling decisions because I think the nice thing, obviously, is that I think Newsle's kind of proven himself to be a reliable backup center. That's nice. You got to see it a little bit last year, but it's still like, well, we're not really sure how this would look outside of a game here and there. But I think Newsle, and good for him, he's proven that he is a reliable, spot starter in the NFL. A guy that can pass protect for you, not really run block. That's kind of his Achilles heel. Is that he's just not a very impactful run blocker, that's why you make the change to Drew Dalman, because Drew Dalman, isn't a world beater as a pass protector. He's probably about the same as Newsle, but he's one of the NFL's best run blocking centers. So it's like in a game against Denver where you really need to be able to run the ball if you're going to have success in this game. You can't let them tee off on Kirk Cousins. You can't get stuck in 3rd and long and stuff like that. I figured that was just this was the carpet was rolled out to get Dalman back in here because we need you, bud. We need to run this football. They don't do it. It's definitely confusing to say the least. This team in general, I think, has handled the roster a little bit strangely at times. This is just another example of that. They've also kind of shown that they're not to be trusted with their injury evaluations, which, obviously it's not always that they're intentionally misleading anyone with these injury evaluations. Sometimes things just change throughout the course of a week. But, when you hear well, Drew Dalman's going to play if he's healthy, and then he's active and doesn't play, that kind of makes you question. And it's like, oh yeah, well, Troy, we expect Troy to play. And it's like, no, we've been hearing that for 2 months now. And I think fans are starting to take notice that maybe this team is not trustworthy with their injury evaluations. I guess we'll just have to deal with that going forward, that we, have to assume that this coaching staff is not telling the truth. But yeah, I mean, I think the injuries are certainly something that can be fixed. We should expect a lot of these guys to come back. That's a big part of this equation, and that's the easily fixable part, theoretically. The harder parts will be on defense, can we there's no fixing the pass rush. I think every reasonable fan knows that there's no way you fix this pass rush. Is there any way, Adnan, for them to improve it to even a below average level as opposed to the historically bad pass rush that it is currently looking like?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on. No.
No, it's I guess the easy answer is bring more blitzes, bring more pressure. I think they only rushed for the vast majority of snaps against the Denver Broncos, and obviously none of these guys can really win one-on-one. The edge room is pitiful. Matthew Judon is horrendous this year. We thought that the interior pass rush was going to be where the strength is, but they just have not gotten it done either. But obviously, you run the risk of less people in coverage. You run the risk of sort of getting exposed if those blitzes don't get home. I mean, maybe Troy Anderson being back will be able to help. Caden Ellis has been solid when it comes to some of those blitzes and sending him against the quarterback. And if you have Troy Anderson, then you can sort of utilize Caden Ellis a bit more, because you can trust Troy on the back end a bit more than you can Nate Landman at the very least in pass coverage. But yeah, no, this pass rush is, I mean, it's going to remain pitiful. It just sort of is what it is, and you sort of just have to do everything you can to survive it and to weather the storm as much as possible. And I mean, the secondary played very well to start the season. Obviously, you have a really strong safety tandem. Jesse Bates continues playing hero ball on this defense, and you sort of just have to, as much as I hate to say it, you sort of have to just keep hoping that, the right plays break in your favor and that you can have like a brilliant play from Jesse Bates that turns the tide of a game, or a brilliant play from AJ Terrell or Justin Simmons or someone where it gives the defense just enough of a jolt. Because to be honest with you, that's at least 3 of the Falcons' wins have come directly from, having a brilliant individual play on defense from someone. But the issue is you obviously just can't continue to bank on that, and the well is probably going to run dry eventually. But yeah, it's hard times on the defense. Like, the defense is really bad overall. They've given up a scoring drive on 47.7% of opposing drives. Only the Panthers and Jaguars have given up more by 1 measly percent. So you're in really, really bad company. Even though the defense sort of bends but doesn't break, it's still bending way too much. And obviously that's resulted in some very lopsided time of possession. It's resulted in the defense staying on the field, getting more tired, and yeah, it's just really bad right now. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can dial up some more blitzes if you really, want to sort of create more pressure, but you have to run the risks with that. And with this defense, I just have no hope of ever being able to successfully get pressure rushing only 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I mean, Aaron, do you have any ideas about squeezing some juice out of this pass rush? I mean, obviously we've seen them try rotating guys in off the practice squad. They've seemingly tried to get some of these young guys snaps. I mean, they've really tried not to get Brandon Dorlus snaps. I think they were forced to give him snaps this week against their will, it seems. But I mean, any ideas on your end about how we can squeeze anything out of this pass rush group?
Well, whether Matthew Judon is going to play good football down the stretch, obviously, is probably not something that I would tell anybody that you should bank on. But he had a sack. He had a sack on Sunday, so like
technically
yeah,
had a sack, yes.
And him getting that sack was pivotal because the Falcons had another miscommunication in the secondary on that particular play, and so there was a potential touchdown on that play if he doesn't get that sack. But I think if this pass rush is going to go from the worst pass rush in the NFL to maybe the second or third worst, because that's about the most realistic hope that you could have, is Judon actually starts playing well, which again, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. And again, I think if you can get Troy Anderson back healthy and playing good Troy Anderson football, which we've only really seen like once up to this point in his career, but if you can get that for, let's say, 4 out of the last 6 games, that does potentially free you up to be a little bit more aggressive, trying to, throw some simulated pressures there with Caden Ellis, where we've seen him be very productive up to this point. I think he's still technically leading the team according to PFF in pressures, and mostly because of that. And so it's like, okay, if you can get that going, if Judon somehow, starts, getting home, if Arnold Ebiketie starts getting home in addition to his pressure, if you can kind of maybe rotate more of the young D tackles in the lineup, like Brandon Dorlus, like Zach Harrison, maybe that allows Grady Jarrett to be a little bit fresher, and maybe he starts getting home. Same thing with David Onyemata. Maybe the Falcons can get 10 sacks over the last 6 games, and we can crack 20 sacks this year and be like, hey, we did it, guys. We got to 20. I mean, that's really, to me, the goal at this point in time. Can we get to 20 sacks? At the beginning of the season, we're trying to get to 40, but now it's just like, can we just get to 20 sacks? That's all I need. Just 20 sacks.
That would miracle.
We will have a party. That week 18 game when we take down Bryce Young for that 20th sack. Oh boy, that's going to be so happy. It's going to be so happy. So.
This is such a sad conversation.
Yeah. No, I mean, you get 1 Uncrustable for each sack at the end of the year, guys. So you better start working hard to get all those Uncrustables gift wrapped and put in your locker. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like Khalid Kareem looks interesting, so obviously you see if you give him more snaps, does he continue to produce? Brandon Dorless had an interesting debut. I think Zach Harrison, hopefully he's not seriously injured. But he again, like I feel like we need to see him. Like he's one of your most promising young players, and the fact that it's like he seems like he's trapped on 15 snap island. This is different than McGarry Island. This is a separate island.
Okay.
There's a lot of islands out there. As you know, I think there's 10,000 islands in the Florida Keys or something. He's down there on one of those. It's 13 snap island, and next to it's 15 snap island. But so he's got to take baby steps to get up, to like 30 snap island. But but other than that, rushing 5 seems to be like when they rush 5, they get pressure more consistently. But again, it's like you can't really do that if you have 3 players in your secondary down with injuries and you have 0 trust. But yeah, it's just the way that even like when everyone was healthy, the way they play defense, seems like the opposite of their personnel. Like the way that it's set up, it makes it look like they trust their front and don't trust their corners, when I think it should be the other way around, and they play more aggressive coverage that looks like they trust their secondary and that they don't trust their front. But it doesn't seem like they've talked about, obviously, in their press conferences, like, oh, we'll do whatever it takes to win. But I don't have any faith that they're going to change anything schematically. We're going to play nickel. It's like they got the memo from like 10 years ago that nickel's the new base, and they're like, well, that's right, guys, we're playing nickel. We won't play base and we won't play dime. We're going to play nickel. That's what we play. I don't love that, but yeah, I'm not really sure what else you can do pass rush wise. They obviously the biggest boost you could get was from the trade deadline, but even that, who knows how much that really would have helped. Maybe a little bit, like you said, maybe be the 30th pass rush instead of 32nd. And that might matter in this league when the margins are small and you need to get one more win than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or the same number of wins as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it doesn't feel great at this point. But offensively defensively, I'm not sure what else we could do other than just hope guys get healthy and maybe, I don't know. What do you think, Aaron? Do you think we see any schematic tweaks at all coming out of the bye, or are we just gonna roll with what we've been doing?
I'm talking about offensively or defensively?
Defensively, yeah.
It might change up the coverages. They've been playing around with man coverage occasionally. They've been playing around with cover 3 and then cover 2 and then cover 6 and stuff like that. Like they might tweak it a little bit, but I'm not expecting them to completely come out with a brand new defense and suddenly, we got to see a little bit of 4-3 against the Saints, rather than the 3-4 that they've been playing. So if Troy Anderson's healthy, they might tinker with that a little bit more. So there are options on the table, but me, my expectations are always really low. So I don't put expectations on the Atlanta Falcons, and therefore they will never disappoint you. So That's basically the rules that I live by. So I go into this bye week not expecting them to change. And so if they do change some things and we see some new looks and wrinkles against the Chargers and Vikings and all that stuff, then I'll be like, oh, this, what was this? I've never seen this before. But yeah, I'm not going into it expecting any tweaks, but certainly, if they dial up a little bit more press coverage, bring a little bit more, be more aggressive on the blitzes, playing a little bit more man coverage, maybe mix in some 4-3 looks, all things that they've dabbled in at times this season. Maybe they dabble in it a little bit more after the bye, but I'm not going into it expecting anything.
Yeah, fair enough. Adnan, any schematic changes that you'd be pounding the table for as we exit the bye week?
I would like to see them not give so much cushion on some of those third downs, just because you have to really be able to tackle very well if you're going to get away with that. And as we saw last game, they're not really a great tackling team. Other than Jesse Bates, this defense just doesn't really do much very well. So yeah, like I won't lie. I was infuriated at some of those third and longs, like the coverage that they played. I think at one point it was like a 3rd and 13 or something like that, and they converted it on a screen pass because everyone lined up beyond the first down marker when the pass was thrown, and it's like nobody could really complete the tackle before the first down. So yeah, I mean, I'd be on board with a little bit more press coverage. Um, just I don't know. I don't think you can sort of get away with what they're getting away with by not having the fundamentals down. And yeah, this defense is just a very, very sad, unit of it's just a very sad unit right now.
Yeah, yeah. Like I agree with that. Like I think if anything, we see some tweaks, like the wrinkle where they had D. Alford, manned up on CD Lamb, like that type of stuff. Like they're not gonna. This isn't gonna become the Nielsen defense, nor should it necessarily. But it's just, anything where you're gonna. I think. I mean, I hate this like style of, off coverage. I'm not a fan of it. It certainly can work. It does work in the NFL for plenty of teams. I just don't personally like it. So I that's why I was a big fan of the Nielsen defense. I was like, oh hell yeah, let's get out here, let's man up, let's smash these guys, let's smack them around, let's create PBUs, and let's also give up big plays. That does happen sometimes when you play that style of defense. But I would rather watch that than what we're watching right now, certainly. But they're not likely to make a wholesale change like that. But I think incorporating more man, especially for guys like Terrell and Alford, where we know those guys, like Terrell in particular, I think he just started to excel in it last year at a certain point. Alford, I thought he was looking pretty good in that, like through much of the season before getting benched for Mike Hughes inexplicably. Hughes seems, if anyone has like responded to the shift to a lot more zone, like favorably, it's definitely been Mike Hughes. I mean, he's certainly been the most consistently good guy of these three. And obviously he's been playing the run super well. He's like the one reliable tackler in the cornerback room right now. But yeah, I don't expect any big changes, but if anything, maybe rushing 5 more often, getting Caden Ellis involved in more pressure packages, and maybe playing some more man coverage, getting guys opportunities, even if it's like man match or some mixed coverages, just to make it a little bit more difficult for the defense. And also, like, if they want to play a safety in the box, it should probably be like Jesse Bates, given that he seems to be the better box safety. I mean, obviously Bates is probably the better deep safety too, but Simmons has just not responded well to being in the box, I don't think. So I'm not sure what the answer is there. It seems like they want to occasionally move a safety down into the box, and you should be able to do that, but it just hasn't really been effective for them so far. So I'm not sure exactly what the answer is with that, but they got to figure out something. But on the offensive side, it seems like the problems aren't quite as dire. Obviously, they got exposed against. I think people, for whatever reason, people seem to like not respect this Denver defense going into this game. Like, oh yeah, the Falcons will put up points on them. It's like, have you like watched this defense? Like, they're one of the top. I mean, yeah, the Falcons definitely, they played the Steelers, and that's obviously in that conversation for the best defense in the NFL. The Chiefs defense is certainly up there as well, but this Denver defense right now in this part of the season is playing great football. So I don't want to, say like, oh, well, the offense is doomed because they had a bad game against one of the NFL's best defenses. But, Aaron, is there anything you would tweak in terms of the offensive scheme? Any more runs, more other players getting involved, more pits, perhaps? I mean, I know that these are all hot button issues in today's Falcons discourse, but what's your take on that?
I mean, I'm always in favor of more Kyle Pitts. I've been pounding that table all season long, and in October it was like, oh, this is exactly what I want, and then it kind of disappeared once we got to Kirk Vimber. Yeah, I think I would love to see the Falcons kind of move away from running 11 personnel 98% of the time. I know in this Broncos game that they ran more 12, but my recollection is that was all at the end of the game when Penix was in the game and they were just running the clock out or whatever. hopefully, Charlie Warner comes back from his concussion and you can mix in some 12 with 2 tight ends, mix in some 21 with Tyler Algier as well, and have Tyler Algier in the backfield on passing down so that you can use Bijan as a weapon, as a receiver, which, we haven't really maximized Bijan in that, because, he's done a excellent job this season on the opportunities he gets, but most of those opportunities are check downs. And it's a similar conversation with Kyle Pitts, where it's like, we get that one corner out to Kyle Pitts a game, and then every other catch he has is pretty much a check down. And so I would like to see those guys get featured a little bit more in the passing attack rather than it just always being Mooney and London. But obviously, when the offense is clicking with Mooney and London, like, I'm not complaining about it. But it obviously was not clicking to the degree that it was this Sunday. And that was the one area that I thought the Broncos were vulnerable with, which is their linebacker core. And you saw that one sort of wheel route that Kirk dropped in the bucket on like a 3rd down in the second quarter to Bijan going up against Cody Barton. And that was really like the only time the Falcons seemed like they were trying to attack those guys. So basically, most of my offensive concerns are just like, something that you see pretty commonly in the McVay-Shanahan coaching tree, which is they find a weakness on the defense and they attack it over and over and over again. And it's not to say that Zach Robinson hasn't done that, because I do think they were trying to go after Jaquan McMillan, as I said earlier, in this Broncos game. But I would just like to see that button get spammed a little bit more, because I think you saw Sean Payton do that in this game with all the sort of big plays that he was able to get against the Clark Phillipses and the Richie Grants and all those guys in this game. And so, like, I just like to see more of that, so that, when we face some of these tough defenses against the Chargers, against the Vikings and whatnot, but there's going to be a weakness on those defense. And I want you to spam that weakness as much as humanly possible. And so I think if you can do that consistently, then you will see this offense being able to really attack some of these good defenses. And that's kind of the main thing that I'm looking for.
Yeah, no, I think those are good suggestions. Adnan, what would you change going forward about the Falcons offense heading out of the bye week?
I'd like to see them not completely spam outside zone 85% of the time on Bijan Robinson runs. Like what we've been yelling about it all year, and that seems like one of the only things that they just have never sort of adjusted to, changed. And don't get me wrong, Bijan Robinson has done a hell of a job on some of those runs, and honestly a hell of a job on some of those runs where he's sort of set up for failure, where the defenders are just waiting for him and he just makes some otherworldly cut or otherworldly move to get around 2 of them. He's really sort of showcased himself as one of the best running backs in the NFL this season. And, it's just a testament to him, but he can run inside zone. Like he's very good at it. He was very good at it at Texas. And I just kind of sound like a broken record saying this every single week, but yeah, let's not be as predictable when it comes to, Bijan Robinson in the game, and the defense can just lock in on those, out exterior portions of the offensive line, knowing that, he's going to go, one of those places. That's the schematic thing. Outside of that, it's not a schematical adjustment, but Kirk Cousins, he cannot keep fumbling the ball at this rate. The Falcons have, in fairness, only lost 2 of his fumbles, but he leads the league with 11 fumbles this year, and he leads the league by a good margin. Anthony Richardson is second with 8. And yeah, Anthony Richardson, was benched and he has his own issues. But man, Kirk Cousins, it almost feels like every time he's touched in that backfield, he's dropping the ball. He's had 5 straight games with a fumble. 8 out of his 11 games, he's fumbled it. And, just because you don't lose the fumble doesn't mean that it's not catastrophic, because you fumble the ball, you're losing even more yardage. And it sort of did cost you a chance to go downfield against the Saints when Chase Young got a sack against him on that final drive, and then you lost your timeout. You were completely scrambling. But yeah, like, I get that Kirk Cousins is not he's arguably the least mobile quarterback in the NFL right now, but Yeah, you cannot keep just dropping the ball. Like it's
That's going to
it's
cost
just
them
too much.
eventually in a
It's
big
going to
way.
cost them down, especially against some of these better teams.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with both of what you guys said. I think like running more diverse run concepts. We've been talking about that for a while. I feel like last time you were on the show, Eric, we were talking about that. So like, I don't know if like they have been more willing to run inside zone. It's still not a huge part of their offense. They've been more willing to do it. I wonder if like with Dahlman coming back, if they'll be more willing to try out more inside running or more, gap concepts or things like that. But I do think like they need to diversify it, and Bijan's so good at whatever they run. I think they should just give it a try. I think a guy like Bergeron with his size could potentially be a weapon there too, and their interior is really good. So it's like you would like, I mean, their interior is arguably better than their outside blocking, given that Jake Matthews has kind of taken a step back as a run blocker over the years, where McGarry is still very good, but those three interior guys should be the engine of your offense going forward, given, the youth there and what you have invested in them. And I would like to see that. Obviously, I think what Aaron was saying about 12%, like I thought 12 was going to be their 11. Like it was going to be their version of what the Rams were doing, right? Where they would have the same personnel. They obviously played 11 exclusively, but the Falcons have Kyle Pitts. So it's like, okay, well, you're going to keep that 11. It's still 11, quote unquote. You're kind of moving Pitts and London and guys around. So one of those guys is the slot receiver, if that's Pitts or if Pitts is outside or whatever you have. If he's in a bunch, you figure out a way to have him doing that with Charlie Werner being your primary inline guy. I thought that was the way they were going to do it. And to be fair, they came out doing that in the first game with that bizarre looking offense they were running. And then they just went away from it. They went to Ray McLeod and they kind of never looked back. And it's not that Ray has been a problem. It's just I think Kyle Pitts is potentially a bigger boost to your offense than what Ray McLeod can give you, and I think he's a game changer. I think Ray McLeod is a good piece. Kyle Pitts is a game changer, and you have to find a way to take advantage of your game-changing talents that you have on the roster, and it's disappointing so far that they kind of started to do it and then they just pulled it back. And it's bizarre to me. It's concerning about why we haven't been able to consistently utilize him. But I think you got to find a way to get that done, because you obviously have great outside talent in London and Darnell Mooney, who's been a tremendous asset and just a really pleasant surprise, more than justifying that contract. But I wonder, what they'll do to see if we can figure out a way to get, Pitts and Werner on the field more, given that Werner has been like a key component to their run game and just a great asset to have out there. So other than that, I think we all kind of agree on some of the necessary changes for this offense. But this team, I think some of these things, again, some of these things are fixable, right? Like you can make some tweaks here and there. You could get guys back from injury. Some of these things aren't, right? The pass rush ain't, Daniil Hunter isn't coming back from Houston to sign with the Falcons. That's not going to happen. There's not really any way to meaningfully fix the pass rush this year, but they can do things like giving more of these young players that are going to be leaned on next year snaps, and seeing if you can continue to develop some of those guys, and hope for the best there. But yeah, this team, you hate to have a loss like this going into the bye week. For fans, obviously it's terrible. We have to sit and chew on it. But, I do wonder like if it's good for them, like that they can't just sort of be like, if they had won the Saints game and then they lost this game and they're going into the bye at like 7-4, do they really like sit down and like take a good hard look in the mirror at like what their issues are to the same extent as if they go in there at 6-5? Like maybe in some ways this is the wake up call they needed, having this 2-game skid here. That's me trying to spin it in a positive way. Like getting this big loss dropped on you maybe could convince you to make more changes or take more steps than you would have otherwise. But who knows what they'll do for sure. But yeah, I'm hopeful that they can fix some of these issues. I still personally think that they're likely to make the playoffs. I mean, look, they only need to go 3-3 to finish with 9 wins. And you know, I know a lot of people are looking at the Bucs schedule and being like, oh well, the Bucs they could easily go 6-1. You never easily go 6-1. It doesn't matter who you play. Like 6-1 is 6-1 in the NFL. Like you get, and the Bucs still have to play the Chargers, and the Chargers are, as we're probably going to see, you know, over the next couple of weeks, very good football team. So they're probably not winning that game, and then they have and if they lose that Chargers game, they have no margin for error. Because the Falcons, even though they do play 3 tough teams, they also play 3 cupcake, quote unquote, games. You know, the Falcons, you know, can they really call anyone a cupcake game? But, you know, theoretically, the Giants with Tommy DeVito, the Raiders with Desmond Ridder, maybe, you know, the Desmond Ridder revenge game, and the Carolina Panthers, who, you know, despite getting more from Bryce Young, needed overtime to beat those, you know, New York Giants. So those are 3 games that you expect to win, and in that case, you're at 9 wins, and the Bucs have to get ahead of you. That I think the story of the season could be that tiebreaker over the Bucs, and that the Bucs just had to basically be flawless and aren't maybe able to get it done, considering that statistically the Bucs defense is worse than Atlanta in a lot of categories. So, but yeah, Adnan, what do you think rest of the season? Because technically, in my predictions, I actually had them with a worse record than this going into the bye, and that they would finish really strong. So they're still on track for what I had predicted. But what are your sort of thoughts now, rest of season?
I mean, I'm frustrated that it has to be so difficult. Because if you had just won that Saints game, then you know you have a 2-game lead and the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers, and they're not really going to be able to. I mean, they can put some pressure on, but it's not really going to be, you know, super tight as long as you win these games that you need to win. But, you know, like Aaron said, the Falcons can never make things easy. Yeah, it's probably going to be difficult. I do think out of these next 2 games, the Chargers and Vikings, your best bet is this next game against Los Angeles, because the same way that the Falcons had severe logistical disadvantages against Denver, that seems tenfold for Los Angeles in this next game. Like, it is one of the biggest logistical discrepancies I've ever seen with the Falcons game. And I, you know, write an article literally looking at just the logistics after the schedule comes out. The Chargers are playing a Monday night game this week against the Baltimore Ravens in Los Angeles. They have to fly cross country to Atlanta to face a well-rested Falcons team that is coming off a bye week. It doesn't get any more advantageous than that. I do think the Chargers are a better football team than the Falcons. I love what Jim Harbaugh is doing over there. I think he deserves a shout for Coach of the Year. Justin Herbert looks, you know, as good as advertised, but the Falcons, they'll have a really good chance this week. And if they can come away with a win, not this week, next week, if they can come away with a win in that Chargers game, then it's going to be, you know, a lot less stress, because you got done, you know, you won one of these difficult ones. And then Minnesota, I'm not discounting that Vikings game. In fact, I've been calling the Vikings frauds all year. Maybe we're the frauds. So,
are we the baddies?
Yeah. Honestly, I really need the Falcons to come through for me in that game, because I've been talking a lot of shit about the Vikings. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But yeah, you have got to beat the Raiders, Giants, and Panthers. Like, there is no excuse. You cannot Falcon. You cannot Falcon in one
do
of
it.
Like, you
not allowed. Yeah.
It's like you have no margin for error if you do lose these games against the Chargers and Vikings. And then the Commanders game, that Commanders are not looking like a bad football team at all. I mean, hey, who knows? Cliff Kingsbury's offense, maybe it started to.
It's begun, right?
Yeah, it's started to go downhill. Yeah, you know, everyone was Everyone's talking about how Kyler Murray, goes off the hill when COD comes out. Maybe Cliff Kingsbury's playing COD right.
Maybe he was the COD player all along.
Maybe it was him, because Kyler Murray looks good right now since COD came out. But yeah, I think the Falcons will have just enough juice to hold them off because of that tiebreaker. And I do think that they're going to beat the Chargers coming out of this bye week, but man, it's frustrating.
It's dicey still. It's
really dicey frustrating. Still. It's frustrating that we have to do a game by game analysis right now and just be like, okay, we have to win this game. You can lose this game, because after that second Bucs game, that second Bucs win, it should have sort of been like all right, let's wrap this division up early and then start focusing on NFC seeding. That's what a serious team would have done. But, as we know, the Falcons haven't really been a serious team in the past 7 or 8 years.
They're not used to it. Yeah, this is a new experience for this team to be actually involved in these discussions. But yeah, Aaron, how are you feeling about how the rest of the season's going to play out for these Falcons?
Well, as I said, like it will. I just book it. It's going to come down to week 18, a win, and you're in, and we're going to be sitting there sweating bullets in the fourth quarter in a 1-score game, probably down 3 points or something ridiculous in the fourth quarter against the Carolina Panthers. Like, just accept it. And once you do, like, then everything else is like, all right, this is fine. I already know what's going to happen. I already seen the end of this movie before, right? A week 18 game of season finale game against the Carolina Panthers. Oh, like, that's never happened for the Falcons, where they had to win that game and make the playoffs. Like, that's never happened before. I've never seen this movie before. So I just say, like, just accept it, make peace with it. You spend the next 8 weeks making peace with it, or whatever you have to. But yeah, like the team, my preseason predictions, I had them 6-5 going into the bye week. I had them losing to the Chargers and Vikings coming out of the bye. So I hope that prediction does not come true. And so far, my 6-5 has been off in terms of the actual games that they've won. Like, I had them beating the Steelers and losing to the Eagles, and I think I had them losing to the Bucs and beating the Saints or something. But so hopefully the math will work out. And I think in my original preseason predictions, I had them winning the last 4 games. So hopefully the record will come out 10-7. It's just how we get to 10-7, no idea. But I'm just sitting here telling you guys, it's going to be. We're going to be week 17. Both the Bucs and Falcons are going to be 9-7 at that point in time, and that week 18 game is going to decide the fate of both teams' season. So that's what it's going to be. So just accept it.
It's gonna happen. This is just be prepared. I agree. Prepare yourselves now, folks, for the inevitability that is this Falcons team making this way harder. It could have been.
It could have been, but it's the Falcons.
It could have been, but it won't. Yeah. Yeah. Last note before we sign off, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. Please like, subscribe, leave that 5-star review on your podcast platforms of choice if you enjoyed tonight's episode. Really appreciate you guys. What'd you think of Aaron? What'd you think of Penix? We got a couple Penix throws in there. So what do you think about Penix letting it rip there towards the end of the game?
Yeah. The first 2 throws were really good. I was very excited. I did a film breakdown for all 5 of those plays. It was a little wonky on the last 3, but again, he's young. He's only thrown like 22 NFL passes, so like it is what it is. But like it gets you excited for what this offense can be when you have a quarterback that can some rip those throws outside the numbers and over the middle, like you saw him do in this game. So for me, if and this is definitely not going to happen because the Atlanta Falcons, but if we happen to miss the playoffs this year for some reason, some crazy reason that no one can possibly fathom, I am going to look forward to like building the team for whenever Michael Penix takes over and just being like, let's just get the team right for Michael Penix so that I can leave all this sadness behind, from my Falcon fandom. So it did get me, it did wet my whistle a little bit for what the future is to come in terms of putting these pieces around. That's part of the reason why I didn't want the Falcons to trade that 4th round pick at the trade deadline, because I'm like, that's a player that's going to be starting on that Michael Penix team in 2026. So I need that guy more than I need, 4 more sacks from Azeez Ojulari. Although right now I would take those 4 more sacks right now.
I'm starting to consider, starting to reconsider this, but yeah, no, I agree with you there. Adnan, what do you think of the Penix experience against the Broncos?
Oh, two throws in, I was like, yeah, let's get Cousins out of here. Like,
get that bum out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new era beginning. No, the first 2 throws were, that second one to Casey Washington, and Casey didn't really come up with it, but man, that was on a rope. Like that's exactly what we were seeing in camp. That's exactly some of what we were seeing in that one preseason game he played, and not the other ones, even though he hasn't played at all this season. But I digress. Yeah, the conversations for the
let it go. Let it go.
Yeah,
I can't. Cool. I just can't.
Cool. Yes. Cool. But yeah, no, it was promising. Like I really liked what I saw from him. It's not easy, being thrown into the fire against that Denver Broncos team, but I feel like he responded really well. He didn't, just like in that preseason game, he didn't really put any balls in harm's way, which is one of the first things you look for from a rookie quarterback. Like I'm sure that the adrenaline was pumping for him. It wasn't technically his first NFL game. He did get in against the Seahawks in that blowout, but they didn't really let him uncork the ball at all in that game. Like they just had him, just handing it off against the Seahawks for the most part. So, it's exciting. Like at the very least, we came out of that Broncos game, and you know what? I'm leaving here with something.
Yeah. No, you like to see it, like that he looks promising in limited reps. That's all we're really looking for at this point. But that they're walking into dangerous territory, right? With like if they put Penix in and he started, ripping touchdowns and all this, it's like, oh, we got to get Kirk out of here. This young gun's coming in. But can
you imagine the discourse if Penix went in there just guns blazing, tied the game?
I mean, if he completes that to Casey Washington, he might score a touchdown. Like, I mean, who knows? But that's.
We'd be talking about the worst contract in Falcons free agent history right now.
Oh, there's still time. Don't worry. There's still a lot of football left. No, but guys, thanks for hanging out with us tonight on the Falcoholic Live. We hope you enjoyed this bye week edition here as we tried to get into some of these Falcons issues, which I'm sure you guys know, not most of them aren't fixable realistically. Some of them might be, and that's all this team really needs to win this NFC South. It's not the most daunting hill to climb. Hopefully they can handle this assignment. But it's the Falcons, so they're definitely going to make us sweat it out, as Aaron said. But speaking of Aaron, he's still on Twitter at Locked On Falcons. Not as much posting going on, which I'm sure some of you are happy about. I miss it, but Aaron, thanks again for making time. He's the host of the Locked On Falcons podcast. Check that out. He's getting episodes out to you guys almost every day still now, or is it? Yep, every day. What a trooper this guy is. Aaron, anything else you want to plug before we sign off tonight?
No. I recently joined Blue Sky at Falcons, so
there we go. It's back.
You can get my snark over there. I haven't gotten it truly going yet over there, but if that's what you're into, we'll get that thing going down the stretch. So probably won't be tweeting as much on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we got lots of great content bye week. We'll be doing some roster breakdowns at the beginning of next week on Locked On Falcons, looking at every position group and where they can improve in the offseason before we turn our attention to that Chargers game next week. So all great content coming your way on Locked On Falcons on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
Absolutely. Make sure to go check that out, guys. Also, of course, with me, my co-host, Adnan Ikic. He's at Say Which Way. Adnan, anything else you'd like to plug before we sign off tonight?
I just I'm doing my series of the Falcons fantasy stud and dud that went up a little late this week, but tracking a standout performer in fantasy football and someone who had a very poor fantasy performance. So we'll have a lot of great stuff going on going up at thefalcoholic.com, a lot of big picture stuff. So yeah, just plugging thefalcoholic.com. I will give a shout out after we, sort of spent a lot of time, not only criticizing but also analyzing his job security. I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Young Wei Koo, going 2 for 2. So
That was one of the nice things. Yeah.
Two big kicks for him because I feel like he really needed it as a confidence booster, and I feel like the team and the fan base really needed it. I know I sure as hell really needed to see, him, hit both of those kicks, one from over 50 yards. But yeah, if anything else, at least you got that positive heading into the bye week, and I say that because that does coincide with that article I just mentioned, because Young Wei Koo was highlighted in that article.
Yeah, absolutely. Check that out. And nice to see Koo back to hitting field goals. I think that was obviously big for him and big for this team going forward. So love to see that. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm Kevin, I have Falcoholic. Kevin, like I said, subscribe. That really helps us out. Leave a comment. If you got something to say, we'd love to hear it. Leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. That helps us out as well with growing this on the podcast platforms. Check out the Patreons, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live if you want to support the show. Channel memberships on YouTube if you're the video enjoyer. Same thing there. We will obviously not have a game preview this week because there's no game to preview. But we'll be back next week. We'll have another Tuesday Takes. But Trayshawn going up early in the week, and then a game preview coming out next week, talking about that Chargers game. Next week, I think probably no Wednesday shows the day before Thanksgiving. I'll be traveling. I think a lot of other people will as well. So no Wednesday show next week. That'll be when we take our bye week break from the Wednesday show. But we'll have a couple more shows coming for you guys next week. So don't worry about that. But until next time, guys, thanks so much for hanging out this year on the Falcoholic Live. Thanks again to Aaron Freeman for coming on. Thanks to Adnan Ikic for co-hosting with me once again. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you on the Falcoholic Live and Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Have a great